Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Move, Crush, Count. I'm your host, Scott Joseph. Today's episode is brought to you by J&L Marketing, the digital and direct marketing agency that helps you outsmart your toughest competitors so you don't have to outspend them. With their innovative approach, J&L Marketing helps you move the crowd, crush the competition, and count the money. Make sure you visit their website at jnlmarketing.com so you can see how they will help you outsmart your toughest competitors. So let's get started with introducing today's guest, John Traver. He is the CEO of Traver Companies, which include Traver Connect, XPS Solutions, Third Day Ranch. He's got tons of experience driving business growth. He is a true mastermind when it comes to identifying or overcoming the biggest challenges that stand in the way of success. So in this episode, we're going to discuss different insights and strategies that drive real business growth, including the most effective problem-solving processes and techniques that we can use to speed up growth. So it doesn't matter if you're a seasoned business leader, maybe you're just starting out. John's expertise, in my opinion, is invaluable. You're going to take away actionable advice that you can help take your business to the next level. You know, John was a guest on Move, Crush, Count. That's how we met a few years ago. I consider him a great friend. So, I'm going to introduce him now. Welcome back to Move, Crush, Count, John Traver.
Scott, my friend, thank you for inviting us. And you know how I love spending time with you. And I got to tell anybody that's joining us today, this guy is impressive. What he's done in the industry through J&L. And now he has the passion with Move, Crush, Count. He's got the Business Bourbon and Cigars event. He is passionate about teaching, growing, innovating. He oozes this stuff. So the guys that he's running with, the gals that he's running with are people that are also passionate about it. So I'm honored to be here with you, buddy. Thanks for having us.
Well, like-minded people, right? I know you're an innovative guy. You and I have had several interviews. And today we're going to talk a lot more about problem solving, I think, but gear it in a way that drives growth. So I love that. We're going to mix up the questions a little bit differently. And I've done this for the last couple episodes where a lot of what we're going to do is familiar to you because you participate in the Business Bourbon and Cigar Mastermind breakout sessions. And we're going to ask a lot of similar questions so we can kind of root cause what's keeping us from growing. More importantly, really narrow in and focus on finding solutions to those specific problems. So you okay if we dive right in?
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to follow your lead, buddy.
What inspired you to become an entrepreneur? What when you first started, what happened there? What not everybody's cut out for it. You are. Why?
Well, from my perspective, I may be hallucinating, right? I look back and I see an early desire. I see an interest. I think that was stirred up through my parents or my mom and dad. A lawnmower repair business, working for myself in early life farming, using the tractor, doing driveways, whatever. So that's kind of like the early seeds, but I need to tell the rest of the story because I started a company after being in the car business for a number of years, and I had done well and accomplished a few things in automotive. And I start this company, and I'll be honest with you, that was a grind. I think every dollar I brought in, I spent, Yep. And I had one client who was a big dealer group in Wisconsin that called me and ultimately asked me to be director of corporate training was my initial role. And that was a save for me. It was like, whew, okay, good. Did that. And that's really where some of my ideas for updating an outdated sales process, the BDC, that's where those began to kind of come in. So I took a training company background with time in the business and it, but then what I had to do is overcome fear because I got crushed, I got crushed that first attempt. And so, it was like, okay, dude, do you know what you're doing? And I remember starting Traver Technologies in Houston. Dawn and we moved to Houston, and I remember walking in those little offices, 1,042 square feet, and I could see myself on the movie screen, and I'm literally saying, stop, because I'm walking into my own nightmare. Like, what are you doing? And the first half a year there was brutal. It was brutal. And I literally asked myself, what did you do? But I stayed the course. I believed in what I was doing around BDC. The phone rang, Tony Fujita, Toyota Motor Sales. In fact, I saw Mr. Toyota just passed. Did you see that this past
Yeah.
week? 87 years
Yeah.
old. He was at the helm back then. Incredible man. But Tony Fujita called, VP of merchandising for North America, and he had seen what we were doing in like 8 or 10 of the top 25 Toyota stores. And he basically said, hey, we're kind of interested in what you're doing. And that led to a relationship, and it eventually led to me speaking and doing work with Toyota, and the company grew. So, it's interesting, Scott. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to make a contribution. I didn't necessarily have visions of grandeur. I knew I didn't want to be a prisoner to the business I was in. I knew that. Does that make sense to you?
It does.
Because your background is kind of cool with your dad, and like, I don't know if you want to share any of that, but that, I feel like we're sort of in parallel there in how we made the decision to do what we're doing.
Well, we both started our companies, at least in the auto space, that vertical, the same time.
Yep.
It's hard to believe we had not met prior to us doing this show a few years ago.
I know. Remember, you and I've talked
Shocking.
about that. Yeah, you and I've talked about that. There are people that I've seen from afar, and I was so glad you reached out when you did. And of course, we've become fast friends since, and just look forward to the years ahead together.
You're famous for saying something that I think goes well with the theme of this show. And I think you may have said it during one of the mastermind sessions. Maybe it was to Sandy Cerami or somebody else, where I think you were quoted as saying, the difference between a lot of what I do and others is I stay with the problem long enough. I'm not probably saying it exactly the way you say it, but what do you mean by that?
So that's an Einstein quote. What he said was, he said, it's not that I'm smarter. I just stay with the question longer.
That's it. Yes. The
Mhm.
question. And
Yep.
I'm putting up, by the way, I'm putting up Michael Poro's comment where he loves to correct me on here. I love him.
Hey, Mike.
Scott, they're opportunities, not problems, just saying. And so this is coming through. He's coming through on LinkedIn. So we're streaming live on YouTube,
Awesome.
LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. So fire away questions if you've got them.
Yeah.
And we'll try to get to them on air. If not, we can go back. We'll go back and John and I will definitely answer any questions you might have. But there are problems until we turn them into opportunities. And that's what we're going to do today. So,
I love it.
You got to turn them into the opportunity.
Hey, on that, there's an old acrostic that I learned from a guy years ago, and it's called GPO, goals, problems, opportunities. And check this out. If you and I have a room of 100 people, like we will here in about 2 weeks, right?
Yep.
In San Antonio at BB&C, Business Bourbon and Cigars, another one of Scott's creations. Goals, let's see, 15% of the room is goal minded. So like in the car business, there's a lot of management by objective. So there's a lot of those people in the room, but it's about 15%. 80% of the room is they're problem solvers, and 5% of the room are opportunity seekers. So like, Scott, you're very much an opportunity seeker. You look at it that way. You have that. And I like to think that opportunity seekers they're looking for the play that changes the game. That one play that just, and you can see how quick Scott responds. That's home for him. That's how he's built. So in any environment, when you start, like what Mike Poro just said, that's how Mike sees the world. And he's right. And you see how Scott's going, well, it's a problem until, see, Scott's looking for the opportunity. So I just had to throw that in there because I love to hear. And that old GPO, if you guys can remember that, is so helpful, because when you have somebody in front of you that speaks a different language than you, just shift gears, begin to see it the way, and you'll find that you can sort of not only build rapport, but begin to see something maybe in a new way. And that, to me, Scott, is where innovation happens easier for most people, when you begin to see it in a new language. Make sense?
It does. And what's great about this whole topic that we're bringing up right now is it leads me to my next question that I had written down. and this was not planned, so but it's a beautiful segue.
Oh, wonderful.
So
Wonderful.
I love it. So what methods do you use to identify new business opportunities, and what criteria do you use to evaluate those opportunities?
All right. Well, okay, gut level. Here's what I tend to do, but it's your decision. Okay, so just because this is what I'm doing doesn't mean this works for our audience. But um, I think kind of if you listen to what you and I just talked about, you can't do anything in life without powering it with a question. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
So if you and I are walking in the hallway approaching each other, before I say hello to you, I literally have to ask myself, should I say anything? What should I say? Like that is all going on in your brain. Learned this years ago. And when you think about that, you kind of think about your state and your mental outlook on life. Like Mike Porro, if you're still listening, you're a master at this. And I know you're a master at it because of how you talk and the energy you bring to how you're managing your questions. So the questions you ask, I think, are the key to identifying new opportunities, Scott. It's like the more profound the question,
Right.
the better the answer. So here, if you say why me, you may be surprised. Sometimes your brain say, "Well, you deserve it, you old slouch." You know what I mean? You can lie to yourself. But if I were to give you a few examples, okay, I'll give you a handful. Start by asking this about your business: what is our potential? Start there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what's our potential? What's our potential in this space? What's our potential nationally? What's our potential? Is there a global potential for what we're doing? How do we multiply this nationally in, say, the next 36 months? How do we multiply it by 3, by 5, by 10, by 20?
Yeah.
Those are very specific questions. Maybe like here for me at Traver Companies, I have 3 completely different businesses, different leadership teams. And so we challenge ourselves with unique questions, but they apply to each business. So I'll give you an example. Let's start way outside our normal comfort level, if I can do this.
Yeah.
Okay, the ranch. Okay, the ranch. We picture straw in our mouth and we're snapping suspenders, but that's not it at all. Okay, so what are we doing? We're answering this question. How can we contribute most meaningfully to the protein cycle with ranching? How do we contribute to the protein cycle? So you can do that with beef, but you can also do that with forage because beef needs forage. So we started with beef, and through that journey, we discovered forage was it was a kind of the card that had to be played before the cattle. And well, we learned a lot about what was in that line and how we could go much farther with that. We could contribute in a greater way. And so today, we have multiple locations, trucking line, and we provide forage through retail stores across the southeast region or south central region here, in a large way. And so that question kind of drove us. Or XPS Solutions, I bought that company in 2004, Scott, so I sold in 2000. It was November 2000 to ADP, Traver Technologies, the BDC, the original BDC work. And I had a 3-year variable comp piece, right? And so I thought, well, I better start looking for something. And when I bought that company, I thought I was leaving ADP. They came back and said, hey, we want you to be involved in these other divisions. It was automotive service consulting, Mike Nichols Inc., Profit Point, 20 group moderator stuff. And I was like, gosh, I thought you guys wanted me to leave. No, we didn't want you to leave. I don't know why you think that. So now I'm like, I have this company. So that company was very small. It was in self-storage and commercial real estate, but I saw that industry growing. Like I saw America as a pack rat, right? And what I saw in that business is still a similar question we asked today. And it was, how do we create a best-in-class counter experience virtually in commercial real estate and self-storage? So like we have a mobile app for tenants today. We process millions of dollars of payments. We do gate code move. We do actual rentals and move-ins, live AI. So all that comes from that one question. Did it all happen the first year? No. But that question guided us. And then TCON, Traver Connect, the question is literally, how do we positively impact customer experience in the drive, create profitable revenue for fixed ops, and give our dealers a direct advantage, a substantial advantage, whether it's cost reduction, increase in UIO absorption, absorption or UIO retention or all the above. That really drives our thinking. So I think, Scott, in business, a lot of people, okay, there's a small amount of people that can look for the play that changes the game and find them. You're one of those guys. And I'm not saying that because we're public, but I'm saying it because it's true. Like, I've watched you do
Yeah.
it. But let me just tip that up for a second. There are some people that, and I'm going to go somewhere with this, okay? There are some people that think that way all the time, and they're they're trying to get in and get out. And you see it in this space. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yep.
Where they just, okay. So here's the thing. To me, I think real value is created and built over time. And if you ask anyone who's achieved that, literally you're talking about significance. I think the longer the results last, the more significant that activity feels to you and me. Like J&L. Tell me J&L doesn't feel good to you watching what Jamil is doing with your team. Yes?
There's a lot of momentum right now. And
Listen,
you can
listen to
always
his tone change when he says that.
that's
Like, he goes, that's what I'm talking about. But
yeah.
Scott, you could have probably sold that company 20 times. True or
Yeah.
false? Yeah.
Well, if I was smart, if I could go back in time, all right, when we made the switch and started pivoting to digital in 2011,
Yeah.
at that time, the direct mail, the email, the landing page stuff, the stuff we were working with on the OEMs, I should have sold that. It was high.
Yeah.
I should have sold that
Yeah.
and then just started another digital agency,
Yeah.
because then I would have been able to have two assets instead of the one, because we've watched direct mail obviously decline, right? And thank God we made the pivot when we did. But a smarter business person would have, I did ask the right questions back then. I can tell
Hey,
you that.
you know who did that and did it well? And I'm going to finish this thought on
Yeah.
the opportunity, play that changes the game versus, these questions. But you know who did that? You remember Carl Westcott? Who was
I
Carl
don't,
Westcott? ASTN. Remember ASTN,
I
Automotive
do not.
Satellite Television Network? In the 90s, it was
I
hot.
do.
And they were here in Dallas. You remember it now?
Yes, a little bit.
They were in thousands of dealerships. George Stavros, who worked with us at
Yep.
Traver Tech for years, had been there for years. But Carl Westcott sold like in 2000. Think about that. And then what happened next? Al Gore created the internet, right? And
Yep.
so had to, sorry. That's kind of funny. and of course everything went digital and you didn't need satellites and television feeds. He had law enforcement television network, automotive satellite television network. I spoke there. Like, they would fly me up on Mondays for years. Joe Lascota, Vicky Hudson, and I mean, like, in the cabinet here, I have tons of shows that we got to do. But that model went dead. And he sold it at just the right time. And it was hundreds of millions, Scott.
Yeah.
It was a huge deal. But the reason I'm bringing this up, does Warren Buffett trade stocks? No, he doesn't trade stocks. He
Right.
invests in
Not
companies. You
correct.
see my point?
Yep.
So, and I'm not trying to say this is right or wrong if you're in and out of the space or you're making moves. What I'm saying is, the question was asked to me, like, how do I look at this? So I typically look for business trends, Scott, that have some runway. And I look for gaps that I believe we can impact. And so, when I do that, when I'm looking at the business, I cannot do that without thinking about the people in the business. And so
Yep.
I always have a handful of things I'm asking around this whole theme of questions. I'm asking people too. Like, my favorite question when I call any of our leaders is, hey, not only how's it going, how you doing 1 to 10, but the next, because that's personal. That's one of the 5 I'll always ask. But here's what I'll say. I'll say, hey, Scott, what do you need from me? And that always is around decisions. And it's my way of showing them, look, I'm working for you too. Like, this is, and it allows them to stay in sort of a lane where they know I'm going to ask that question. What do you need from me? What do I need to go
Yeah.
chase? What do I need to do? What do you need my help on? That's kind of around problems. What's going on that we haven't talked about? That's kind of like emerging plans. I love that with Bob Gower. Um,
Yeah.
or I'll say, what's cooking that I should know about? That's either around
Yeah.
progress. Usually, hey, well, we have this deal and it's with so and so, and it looks like we're going to need this. And but I mean, look for that to hit. Hey, that's great, you know.
Yeah.
So they want to be able to answer those questions with stories. But so to me, those are a handful, Scott, that I'm asking all the time. And then that's kind of the psychology to answer your question around. To me, it's about significance. As long as I possibly can. And when I measure significance, I need to be transparent with everybody here and say, there is nothing that I'm doing that is going to last forever. So to me, eternity is longer than anything I can do. So the challenge for me is, how long can I make this impact blank automotive? So to see the BDC still going today through some of its bumpy stages, or I have a conversation with a dealer at BB&C, which happened, and this dealer's perception of what the BDC wasn't even close to what I saw it as.
Yeah.
And this dealer was kind of poking holes in it. And I thought no, I didn't argue. I just listened to him. I just tried to see it through his eyes in this particular conversation, but it was an eroded view, Scott,
Yeah.
you know? So anyway, how's that for
Well,
answer?
I love it. And the key, there's such a big difference between setting a goal and asking a question. And to me, the question is so much more powerful, because you can't just sit there and say, all right, how are we going to increase sales 5 times over the next 3 years? You got to go in your head and or with your team, and you got to answer the question. You got to come up with real answers on how to do it. It doesn't matter how big the goal is. There's always an answer. All right.
Yeah.
Because it might require that you buy, a different company. It might require, it's not about what's realistic with our situation right now. It's not, how can I increase sales in the next 3 years 5 times with what I'm doing right now? No, it's about, how can I increase sales 5 times in the next 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, 3 years, whatever. And if that's impossible to do in the current situation, then you have to find an answer that goes outside what you're currently doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you get real breakthroughs. So to me, you nailed me. I am an opportunity guy. I wanted these mastermind stuff that we do to be all about breakthroughs, because for me, breakthroughs are what make people wealthy.
Yes. No, I see it. To me, wealth is created over time. I
Yep.
do think breakthroughs can create wealth if it's managed properly, like huge windfalls, right?
Yep.
But there's 2 models for folks to look at. And so, yeah, stay with the question long enough, you'll be surprised at some of the answers you can get.
So I was on a show, another show, not mine, but somebody else's show the other day.
Regis and Kathy
And
Lee. Oh, that one's
yes.
not around anymore. Was it Michael Strahan?
Well, they asked me, do you think short-term or long-term?
Yes.
I said, I act short, but I think long.
Yeah.
And I said, I never sacrifice. I want immediate results. I want the breakthrough stuff, but I will never do it I will never sacrifice the long term for the short term gain. But I
Yeah.
am always working towards, like, let's just simplify this, right? And let's just say I was trying to sell you something, right? And you've reached out to us, or we reached out to you, and you're interested in buying a product. I'm looking to close you right now, but I'm not going to do it if it jeopardizes or sets you up in a program that jeopardizes something long-term that could be much bigger and better.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's the relation, whatever it might be. I think long, I'll act short, but I'll think long-term. And I always do what's in the greater good of that.
So can I give you an example of that and where we align? So Jamil reached out about a year and a half ago regarding some initiatives you guys had. And I saw them coming through, and I, basically sent him an email or a phone call. And I said, hey, right now, my opinion, the organization won't carry the water the way it needs to be carried on that exercise. And I said, so I would take us off the table. But when we're ready, I'll tell you, And then you'll know if you have the need, okay, you don't even have to wonder if we can execute, because if we're sitting there telling you, you'll know. Same thing. I'm not going to risk
That's
the
right.
relationship for the
Right.
sale, because the name is worth way more. Again, significance is the motivation here, right?
Yeah.
How long can I make an impact on your organization? How long can I impact these people? I know it's not eternal, but how far can I take that? And that challenges me, buddy. That challenges me. It makes me think outside of myself. The other thing is, when you start putting your people together and asking those big questions, do you ever notice how there's an Elvis in the choir? You know what I'm saying? Where it's like, whoa, look how dude thinks. Look at
Yeah.
her. I've never seen that out of her. Like, I love that. I love
I do
finding the
too.
Elvis in the choir, where it's just the choir. We're all supposed to be able to just be average singers, if you will. And all of a sudden, here's somebody, and I'm like, she's a soloist. Have you noticed that?
I love it. Well, as a business owner, what you recognize immediately, right, is this person's got a passion, there's something to this person. They're not here for a check. They're here to make a difference and have a significant impact. So that when people do that, that's why we like it, right? Because as a business owner, we're sitting there and recognize and say, all right, we got somebody on this team that really wants to make a difference here.
There's that, and there's the lid. What did Maxwell say? You remember 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell? You
I
remember that
do,
book?
but I have, but you're gonna have to remind me. My gut is telling me, these 21. You could rattle off all 21, whereas I could not.
I got to do a few things with him through this organization called Equip. So I got to meet him and spend time with him, and love how he thinks. But yeah, the first one is this: an organization. Here's the top of the organization. Okay. And
Yep.
this is the lid. This is the leader. An organization never grows beyond its lid.
Yeah.
So it's called the law of the lid. So if your organization needs to be this tall and your leader is this tall, buddy, you and I have to be able to see that. We have to be able to, and so to me, those questions are also a drill around that. I cannot tell you how many times I've either found leaders that can take us farther inside an organization, or B, realized, that person can only take us so far.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you something, and that goes not just to the top of the organization, but the teams within it. Your sales team, who's their leader? It's only going to, it's the same.
Can I give you another one?
Yeah,
Me,
absolutely.
myself. You did it with Jamil. You pulled yourself out of the way.
Yeah.
And I watched that. Like, I have one particular business, now I have two, that I've already done that with, where like
Yeah.
their SME level, their subject matter expertise is such that I'm going to kind of fan the flame. I'm going to resource the initiative. I'm going to add ideas where I think it can help, but I am going to encourage them to lead well.
Right.
So yeah, there's, again, the game is significance. I'm trying to take it as far as I can. Doesn't matter if it's me. Doesn't matter. It best idea wins.
All right. Let's start asking some questions. Let's dive into some of the things we do during the masterminds.
Wait, didn't we
All
already
right.
ask questions?
Well, we did have, but now we're really going to get into the meat.
Oh,
And
joy.
so
Okay.
it's been great so far.
Okay,
So
great.
I am thinking, all right, we've got things that limit our growth, right? And you can keep this specific to dealerships, but what I want the audience to pay attention to, obviously, if you're a dealer, you need to listen to specifically what's going on here. If you're outside of auto, you need to think about the question we're about to ask. And then more importantly, as we get into solutions, how we come about those, because I think any industry, any business leader can apply the techniques we're about to do into their own, create their own opportunities, handle their own issues, handle their own problems. All right. So what would you say? It's one of the questions we ask right out of the gate in our breakthroughs. What would you say are the three biggest challenges, obstacles, or barriers that limit growth potential in a dealership?
I love this question. I love that you make it three, and I love this question. Okay.
Yep.
From my perspective, I think I'm going to do this categorically because not everybody watching is automotive, but if you're in automotive, we're going to be able to speak to it clearly. So,
Yep.
so this is a macro, okay? These three I'd be looking for and I'd be ready to overcome. And probably the big three in automotive, are, by the way, are the same big three in all of business and life. And I learned this
Okay.
from Bob Beal, who's a friend, mentor, turns 80 in about 2 weeks. He's an incredible guy. Anyway, the three F's. The three F's. These are the three biggest challenges you face. And so, like, you're expecting me to say cash flow or innovation. And I'm going to go up a couple clicks. Okay. The
Yep.
three F's. Scott, did you ever get any F's on your, forget it. I won't ask you in front of everybody. All right. So,
Thank God Sandy Cerami's not on this episode.
I knew there was going to be a Sandy. God bless you, Sandy. Sorry you weren't here, bro. Okay. So the first F is fog. Fog. The second F is fatigue. And the third F is flirtations. Those three will take you. It's kind of like getting on the Titanic. They're going to keep you longer than you want to stay. They're going to cost you more than you want to pay. They're going to take you farther than you want to go, all that, right? So let me unpack each one. Fog. Fog is about clarity, right? So Scott, let's say you and I, we want to go drive F1s on the Autobahn in Germany. And we have the date set for June, and you and I get there, and really weird, they have this huge storm system roll through the night. We landed, we're racing the next morning, or driving, if you will, on the Autobahn. And it is so foggy, we can't even see our hand in front of our face. Scott, how fast are we going to drive? Not very fast, right? So to me, the very first challenge or obstacle or barrier is businesses that lack clarity. They cannot clearly see. Does that make sense? And
Absolutely.
or the leader can see, but he or she is talking to themselves. Like the organization cannot see. That's a problem. You got to be able to clearly be able to see, to be able to, A, cast the vision, B, gain buy-in if you're going to go fast. And speed, I don't think it's always the big that eat the small, as it's been said. It's the fast that eat the slow, right? So
Well,
it's kind of.
and going to your point, right? Once you have that vision, once you get buy-in, all right, can then everyone in the organization clearly do a great job articulating it? Is it just on the salespeople that have a good elevator pitch and know it down? And by the way, most sales teams don't have that down. So,
Yes.
but it should be the entire organization that can clearly articulate what that vision is, and more importantly, how you're going to help clients or your prospects get there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. For that person out there right now listening, it says, Scott, how do I do that? I'm going to give it to you in a word. You ready? Repetition.
Yep.
Repetition.
Yep.
Yes. I mean, how many of us have, gosh, I've told them, I've already presented this. I've already shown them. Okay. Did you say that with your kids when they kept running out in the street? Or did there's this, I always would tell my kids, Scott, you've heard me say this, but I can't tell you how many thousands of conversations I've had one-on-one with my kids, but I always say, hey, look, remember 70-30, 70% of what I'm telling you, I've told you before, 30% is fresh. So if you hear yourself saying, Dad, you've already told me, you need to ask yourself, I wonder why he's telling me that again. 70% is repeat. You need to hear it again. You need to hear it again. And so in business, it's no different. If you haven't shown them, presented it 7, 8, 9 times, you haven't told them yet.
Yeah.
That's just, and then, oh, by the way, the quality of your communications, the response you get, sometimes, it's like, hey, I've told them. And by the way, it was kind of soft the way you told them. It wasn't even that great. And look how they responded. Clearly, you didn't communicate very well. Like if you took ownership of your communication and it was basically the response you got. Now, does that mean you got to yell at them to get there? Not necessarily, not unless you want to eventually lose your credibility in your audience. But to me, really owning that exchange makes you a great teacher, makes you a great leader. Those are some things that are in your control. I think the rule to communicating that stuff, just to kind of go down the rabbit hole, is flexibility. He or she who is most flexible wins. To me, it's like, just because I said it and you didn't do it doesn't mean I'm mad at you. It means I'm going to find a way to move you emotionally, mentally. Yeah. I'm going to find a way to connect with you to where I can smile and go, he's got it. He's running with it.
This must be your son coming in.
Oh, really? Why?
Is
What's
that,
being
is it,
said?
is Spencer? Facts.
Oh, hey,
I've heard
Spence.
that saying once or twice. Thanks, Dad.
Oh, good to see you, buddy. Love you, man. Hey, by the way,
So,
Spencer has taken me to the Masters in 50 days.
oh,
I know
now
somebody's got
that's
to
a
do it.
son.
Yeah.
I hope if my son is listening right now, I hope he's paying attention.
Thanks, buddy.
So
So that's fog. So that's fog. You want me to talk about fatigue?
well, before you do, let me just add one little thing to that because I love that. Because
Okay.
let's just say, how many companies actually did a really good job creating or documenting their core values? And by the way, when you're doing that, it's not what your core values, what you want them to be. Your core values are what they are, and they're not necessarily something that you do every single day, 24/7, 365, but they are what you are when you're at your best
Yeah.
and what you strive to be, right?
Yeah.
Because we all make mistakes. We don't always live up 100% to what our core values are, but they are what you are at your best.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we do is, because obviously we have our year-end meetings, our quarterly meetings, and we cover our core values, but you got to live it. Every evaluation we grade based on our core values.
Mm-hmm.
So we're evaluating each employee based on our core values and explaining that when we hire, we have serious discussions about our core values and questions that try to uncover, do they have our core values? Do they share them or do they not? So, I mean,
How often do
that's
you
just one
revisit it?
example.
How often do you revisit it with the team?
The core
What's that?
values,
Yeah. Yeah. Just bringing them up or going back to them. How often?
our core values are daily. If we have
Dude.
conversations, we always tie into, in other words, when we're communicating throughout, whether it depends on what the conversation's about, right?
Yeah.
There's opportunities every day with somebody to either bring up your vision,
Yeah.
your goals, why we're doing things, what your core values are, how they align with that vision. There's always or our elevator pitch. What is it that we actually do? How do we communicate it?
Mm-hmm.
Depending on the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
these are things you have to reinforce daily
Mm-hmm.
and always not force them into conversation, fit them in when it's naturally inappropriate. But there's opportunities all day long, every day to do that.
That's exceptional. I just want to say what you're doing is exceptional and it's rare. It is not common. Scott, if I say I pledge allegiance, you can already plug in the next words, right?
Correct. Yep.
You and I grew up in a time going to school, we said that every morning. And if we went to a parochial school, a Christian school, whatever, we probably said the Lord's Prayer, right?
Yep.
And it's engraved. Isn't that interesting? And so, whatever you focus on is most real to you, whatever you repeat. So if that's important to you, what you're hearing from Scott, I mean, he's living it out. And that is repeat, man. Put that sucker on repeat, just loop it. And I want to give you a quick example. Tractor Supply Company is a primary vendor for us at Third Day Ranch, Fortune 300 company, and it's an incredible organization. At one point in the last 3 years, I remember looking up the highest increase in stock value over the last 2 decades. And guess who number 2 is? Tractor Supply. Look it up.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to me. So $200 stock today, and in 2011 it was $27 roughly, if I remember right. So anyway, Tractor Supply, they had this little laminated card about like this wide, and on the front it has their values, and on the back it's sort of like, this is our marching orders, these are our business roles, and it's laminated. And everybody in the store, if you go to a Tractor Supply store, ask them for if they have their laminated card. And so my point is, that's another example of how they're reinforcing what they believe in and what their credo is and what they're marching to. There are some organizations out there that you can get off track, but here's the good news. That's why you kind of take, an hour and listen to something like this and say, okay, these are the 3 things we're going back to. These are going to be our blocking and tackling, so that's what I love about small and medium-sized business. You can pivot.
Correct. It is so quick. You can do these things we created our core value cards that employees will write to each other when they've recognized that someone has demonstrated a core value, whether it's something they did above and
Wow.
beyond for a client. So it's just little things that, but to your point, it's got to be nonstop all the time,
Yes.
because it doesn't just, you can't just do it in a meeting and here's our year-end meeting, here's our goals next year, and then no one ever asks how we're going to get there. And I believe in having big goals, right? And big goals require you to ask intelligent questions. So first question I have real quick, because this show's going really good, and I think we're giving a lot of good stuff here. We've got it for an hour, and we're not through a lot. So my question is, can you go longer than an hour?
Yeah, I can go longer, and I definitely want to finish. Do I get to finish?
That's what I was saying. I don't want to cut us off because we're on
Okay.
a roll.
Yeah.
So all right, go on with fatigue.
Okay, so fatigue. What did Lombardi say? He said, fatigue makes cowards of us all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
It makes you tap out. So,
Yep.
they just wear out. So here's my question without unpacking it fully. How do you offset that? Like, look at what you've done in your life from a health standpoint. You've made some changes, right?
Yeah, but no one wants to follow my health. My
No,
health
I know
blueprint.
the business bourbon and cigars thing. Yeah. But I have watched you make some moves. But the bottom line is you got to pay attention to fatigue. I do think, and maybe you'll ask me today something around this, but I do think some of our fatigue is self-induced. You know what I mean? Like we cause it. So fatigue, but fatigue will make you tap out too early. So have a pulse for not only your own, but your team's. And so we look for opportunities, around that. And then flirtations was Bob's third one. Flirtations is it's distraction. It's losing focus. It's tangents. Like that for me is one I have to really rein myself in on, because, and what I mean by that is not being on a tangent, but team members that want to take us on one drives me batty. Because
let me ask you a question. This is just to you personally. A lot of people I feel like that are good visionaries. Like for me, this is what you're saying right here is my biggest challenge for me personally. And I say that because correct, because there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity. I could do this. I could do that. And it is, to your point, I've got to consciously tell myself, stay focused on what is most important here. Discipline and focus. Everyone talks about time being the most valuable thing. I do not believe it is. I believe your discipline and your focus is more important than time. Time is more important than money. But with discipline and focus, you can actually create, it's not creating more time, but with the right discipline and focus, you do create more time for yourself to get other things done, because you're knocking out projects, you're staying true to it. You're not just sitting there starting this and that and everything else that distract you and nothing ever gets finished.
This is a deeper convo, buddy. This one will go way down the manhole. But I like what you're saying. Okay, I do. And there's got to be people listening that are nodding their heads saying the same thing. Here's the thing. I'm gonna just give you just one or two little things that I'll say here a lot. Like Rob Canales is our VP of product dev. He is savant smart. Rob is so sharp. And he and I'll always talk about like projects that are going to take X amount of time. And I'll always say to him, hey, buddy, remember, watch the clock. And what I'm talking about is the ball game, because, he is so good at detail and features. And so it's just my way of saying, remember, if you throw a touchdown pass in the end zone, but nobody's in the stands, they've all left, that means the game's over. So we got to do it while the clock's still running and people are still here for it to count. And so what we use, his strength is taking us to levels of detail and strategy and even features that a lot of people don't see or won't execute on. So he has this focus, but the offset of that is it's got to happen in a certain window. Otherwise, that exercise won't matter because the ship has already sailed. We missed that sail. We missed that market. Does that make sense? So, so the focus, so there's times where I'll be like, hey, look, pare that down. We got to pare that down. Look, this is the window we have to deliver that in. Do you see it? Well, okay. Have you talked to the client? No. Okay. Do you trust me, or do you want me to get you in front of them where you can hear it with your own ears? I trust you. Okay. I'm promising you. How much you want to bet that if we deliver with everything that's being said and we deliver it outside of that window, we get 0. I believe you. Okay. And so those are just ad hoc examples of taking a hyper talented person and balancing it with, they have focus, but sometimes that focus can be so deep. Okay. Now, what about the guy who, like Bob Gower is super creative. He's a developer. He's our chief operating officer. Bob can take, this bottle cap and he can turn it into macaroni and cheese. He can talk to you about how it's a tire. Bob can take some, what I'm talking about, right?
Oh yeah.
I call him the metaphor master because it's like, and he can just, and so, but with Bobby, same thing, just incredible strength. And so it's like, okay, but hey, buddy, we don't need you to develop this into anything else except for what it is. That's what it is, because that's what we can scale and support. So he'll tell you the same thing. So does that make him a bad guy? Heck no. These are guys that we wouldn't be who we are without these two guys. But I use those two guys as an example to say, do you see where flirtations can get you in trouble? And they get, even with great, talented people who are in the prime of their careers. And it's like being able to see that is huge, buddy.
You know who does? And it'd be great if every team and every organization or business was great at this. But the really good IT, you bring up IT and software, and I know you've got a good team there. But I feel like more than any other team, if the team is good, IT and software teams do a phenomenal job at avoiding the flirtation. And here's where I'm going with this. When you have a good team, you've got this big, huge goal, right? Yeah. We want to knock this out, and we want to have this product, this service, because we think this is a game changer, and it's got to be completed in 90 days. All right. All right. So then you ask the questions, how can we accomplish this within 90 days? And then you start game planning the steps that have to happen. And what does a great IT team do? They start chunking it down step by step in 2-week sprints, right? So they got these sprints, and all they do in those sprints is they focus on knocking, not the big goal, this first step to get to that goal, then the second step. And they avoid all those flirtations. And lo and behold, either before or at the 90-day mark, the goal is achieved.
Yeah. They're masters at it. The bottom line to those big three, brother, is anybody that's watching, those are the three you want to watch for, right? And you want to ward them off. And they're disguised as many things, but categorically, they're going to get in the way of progress. And if you look for them and you guard against them, what you'll find is your gains may or may not be fast, but your gains you will hold. You will continually make gains. And all of a sudden it's like, look at these cats. How the heck did they get there? One brick at a time, and just progress. And they're good at avoiding fog, keeping it clear. They're good at avoiding fatigue, keeping it fresh. They're good at avoiding flirtations. They stay focused, and you don't want to have to compete against them because
what was the quote you said about fatigue again? Something about makes cowards, or?
Yeah, Lombardi, fear makes cowards of us all. Yeah.
So, or fatigue makes cowards of us all, right?
Fatigue makes cowards of us all. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it reminded me late in his career with Mike Tyson, when clearly, very late in the last few fights, he wasn't what he was and wasn't committed to it, right? The training and everything else.
Yeah.
And I think it was Lennox Lewis that he fought, and Teddy Atlas, his former trainer. He said it best because, he was sitting there getting hit and eventually knocked out. And everyone was talking about, wow, former champion, look at his heart, look at his commitment. And Teddy said, oh, no. He goes, in boxing, sometimes the easy path is going ahead and getting punched versus putting out the effort, which can be more difficult. When you're fatigued, putting out effort is much harder than it is just to get punched. And
That's rich.
yeah,
That's
and
rich.
think about that. That is, I think anybody that's played any sport can probably associate a little bit to that. If you're tired, sometimes it's easier to go through the motions and get your ass kicked
Yep.
than it is to put out the energy and do what it takes to actually win or try to win.
Yep. Okay. I remember a Jamie Foxx line where he would do this joke about Mike Tyson. And he's like, every time I did this joke, everybody laughed. He goes, it was a guaranteed, the ceiling came down kind of thing. And he goes, I'm at such and such location and I tell the joke, nothing. Nobody laughs. And finally somebody says, Mike's in the house, man. He was in the room. Mike was there. And everyone's like,
I wouldn't have told that. I wouldn't have told that joke if Mike was in here.
Correct.
So he's in better shape now than he was just 10 years ago. I mean, he's in unbelievable shape. All right. So now that you've identified these big challenges, obstacles, barriers that keep us from or limit our growth potential. If we could solve one of those right now, and now you're going to have to get specific. So if you say fog or fatigue or flirtation, you're going to have to get specific as to what it is. So let's take the dealership world for a second, right?
Okay.
If we could eliminate one of them right here and now on this show, give us a specific example of identifying one that would have the biggest impact on a dealership's growth.
All right, I'm going to do an end around here because they're all going to be an issue.
Yeah,
but I'm
absolutely.
going to answer your question. I have some good news for you.
All right.
When you look at those three, what I would do before I pick the one, to me, I would start with the word perspective. Here's why. It's been said perspective is worth like 50 IQ points. Have you ever heard that?
I have not, but now I have. That's why I do these shows. I learn more on these shows. That it's like reading, 500,000 books a year. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Perspective is worth 50 IQ points. So if we focus on one without perspective, we're sort of talking to ourselves. So some people here, let me apply this. So some people appear smarter, but they might not be as wise in life's practical applications. Can you align with that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So it's the old
book smart, street smart.
Bingo.
Yeah.
So Peter Jennings, you remember Peter Jennings, right?
Yep.
And Will Rogers, right? TCU,
yep. Well,
Will Rogers Stadium,
I don't remember Will Rogers. I'll refer to Sandy. I'm sure he does.
That's funny because I saw him talking about Sandy anyway. So Peter Jennings and Will Rogers had one thing in common. They never finished high school.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay. So you start with a healthy and accurate perspective. Okay. So that's one. I think if I had to pick one of those three to prioritize, it would be flirtations.
Okay.
Which is the one you mentioned.
All right.
So why? Well,
so give us an example. Give us a specific example in your world with dealerships where they flirt with something else and don't focus in on what would have the biggest impact on their growth.
Yeah, well, the big one is obvious. It's, our PVR, per vehicle retailed. We spend $600 per NADA. I know there's a store out there that says, well, we only spend $380. The average of the rolled up financial statements in the industry, 17,000 new car dealers, is $625 a car, roughly. Okay. That number just went up and to the right over the years. Would you agree with me? I mean, you're in automotive with me, marketing costs. Okay. So we spend 600 and some bucks to buy the customer, and we hardly spend anything to keep them, So to me, our distractions, I just want to say with flirtations, I'm going to kind of attach these two. Our distractions are built into our lives. And by the way, I mean, I turned this sucker off when you and I started this show.
Yeah.
Okay. But here's your first culprit. I love the tool, but let's be honest, it's devilish, right? Okay. And then what sits on this thing? All the social media, okay. Again, I understand we're doing LinkedIn and YouTube right now. Those are social
Yep.
tools, right?
Yep.
So
So right now we want people to stay on social, but we are advising them once this show's over to make their comments and likes on our stuff, but then get off of it.
yeah, yeah. Well, what did the Greeks say? Moderation in all things. I mean, the
Yeah.
bottom line is it means to an end and all that. So in automotive, the flirtation, Scott, is always on the front end. It's to sell more iron. Let's be honest.
Correct. Oh, yeah.
And the strategic play is own your UIOs. What's a UIO? Units in operation. What is that? Those are vehicles that were registered, okay, RDR'd, retail delivery from my point. They're now in my primary market area, my PMA, and I am supposed to be, as an overture, shepherding that relationship through my service department and through anything else that happens in that customer's journey. And that's where it goes from black and white to gray. And it's not a new phenomenon. It's only been around the whole time, decades, plural. True, right? Am I talking
Yep.
to myself or you agree? Yeah.
I'm
And,
following you 100%.
and there's a ton of band-aids, buddy. There's a ton of band-aids thrown at that. We need to do this, we need to do that. Recalls, I won't go super deep on this, but there's tens of millions of recalls per year. We've been over 50 million a year for almost a decade. Okay, almost a decade. It's 70 million. Takata airbag obviously was a big part of that, but I found it interesting the amount of attention we gave to recalls. And I thought in a way it was healthy, and it is healthy, but it's almost like, again, we're just focusing on one part. It's that whole it's just one more reason to stay in front of the customer, right?
Right.
So
Yep.
the flirtation of going and buying more market share so that, it's like buying a boat and putting it in the slip and never going down to it. Why are you paying for the slip? Why you buy the boat? It just, to me, the logic isn't there. So
Well, one of the best ways to grow market share, John, as you know, is don't have as much leaking out of the bottom of the bucket. So that way, whatever you're putting in at the top, that water level increases. If you're losing as many as you're gated, you're not gaining anything.
We have a couple guys might be saying, or gals saying, "Hey, give me an application, the antidote." The antidote of flirtation is focus, right?
Correct.
So it takes discipline, and discipline has a reward. Okay, I'm going to talk about that for a sec. But in automotive, you say, give me an example, John. Okay, pickup and delivery. How many cars today are being picked up and delivered back to the customer for service? Mobile van, Ed Roberts. He's heralded this. He's championed it. He's killing it, right? Ed's a big part of Business Bourbon and Cigars and some other events going on in automotive. And Ed is frontline. What Ed does so well is what he's passionate about. You ready? Growing people. That's Ed's passion, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes,
It's
it
not
is.
mobile vans. It's not pickup and delivery.
Ed is a true. If there's ever, you talk about pushing positive energy and giving, and it comes back to you. Ed's like a really good example of that, because it's not just his employees, right? I could use the Business Bourbon and Cigars. I mean, he's one of our biggest supporters. Ed is about helping people. If you are someone that he views as I think a good person that is trying to help people, I mean, he is all in and will do whatever it takes, I feel like, to help anyone. To me, he's just one of my favorite people.
Me
I
too.
love that you brought him up.
Me too. Now, the flirtation piece. And again, I would say this to my kids often, but it's your decision, okay? But the consequence or reward is 100% yours. So, and usually that would produce, well, what do you think, Dad? Well,
Right.
have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? But I want them to learn to fish. I want them to learn to make good decisions, right? And so, so the discipline has a reward, but flirtations has a consequence. See, so that's the other thing. If you're going to flirt, no, you're going to get fingers chopped off, folks. It's going to cost you something. Now, you say, John, give me a practical way to kind of develop this discipline. Okay, I'll tell you what's worked really well for me. I don't know if it'll work for you, but I'm happy to share it. I schedule a half a day, Scott, every month just to focus. Literally a half a day. There is no phone. And all I do is focus. And what I would challenge the audience to do is do this for 12 consecutive months. Pick the time. I don't care when it is, day or night, doesn't matter. Block off 4 hours. You're talking 1 to 2% of your time. Okay.
Yep.
And you
Not
do that
even.
every month. And what you want to do is you want to reflect, you want to look and see where flirtations are at play. Got it?
Yeah.
And compare it to what? To what the original course was. See? And when you do this, Scott, if you do this for 4 hours, you just block it off, go to your favorite coffee shop, whatever, put on instrumental music, break out your notepad or whatever it is you use and get after it. You will be shocked at the level of focus that you can bring back to the game. And I'm talking the game before those 4 hours every month. That's it. Just a little bit of time.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to do that. And I'm going to also add it to something else. So part of my daily routine is I end my day after I plan my next day. I sit quietly in my office at home and I journal. And I just started doing this about 1.5 years ago.
Love it.
I was never a journaler, but I started doing it and I thought, all right, you know what? I'm going to start doing this. And I write down my wins for the day, what I accomplished, some things I didn't accomplish. Why do I think I didn't do it? But I'm going to make a conscious effort to reflect on what I flirted with that might have pulled me away on my focus. Because I have 4 or 5 things that every morning I write down that if I had to start the day over again, I'd want to do more of, I put pray more. I put stay disciplined, stay focused, stay uncomfortable. Comfort, convenience it's a bad thing for me, right? Because when I put a value on wanting to be comfortable or convenient, I tend to not lean into doing the things that need to be done to get out of my comfort zone. So I want to stay uncomfortable. I want to stay disciplined. I want to stay focused and I want to pray more. Those are my things. So I'm going to reflect at night and journal, make a conscious effort on what you just said. So I'm going to do this daily, not for 4 hours daily, but maybe once a month daily. But I can spend a few minutes while I'm doing my journaling, putting this into it. And I think that's genius on your part.
Great. I'm glad at least one person is running with it. It's helped me massively. And I'm actually a little reticent as I look back at certain stages of my life where I'm like, dang, I wish I would have been doing that then. So I definitely see the benefit. And there's a bit of
bring up, hey, John.
clarity. Yeah.
I want to bring up another thing when it comes to flirtations, because you and I were talking a few weeks ago and something came up and I might've been talking about my stores. I don't remember what we were specifically talking about, but you talked about the number of calls my service department might get. And this goes to what you're talking about with focus, right? In other words, if dealers only paid more attention to where the volume is and where our interactions are with clients on a daily basis. And I don't know if you remember that part of that conversation, but if you do, could you kind of expand on that a little bit? Because I think it aligns with what we're talking about here.
So you may have to guide me a little bit. I was driving. And I do remember when we talked, it was raining and we were having a good combo. So, okay. So I'm going to you just kind of guide me, but okay. So let's say you have a 100-car a month store and Scott's store is bigger than that, but I'm just going to use a 100-car a month store. That store is going to get 10 to 12 sales calls a day on average. And that store is going to get 65 to 75 service calls a day on average. Okay. So let's think about it. On the showroom floor, we're selling 100 cars a month, 10 cars per person. So we have 10 salespeople. We got 10 to 12 calls. Each person's going to take about a call. Got it? So far, so good, right? Okay. In service, that store is going to have 3 service advisors, right? And they're going to have 65 to 75 calls. Oh, by the way, they're also going to each write 15 open repair orders today with real human beings that are hoping you're not going to screw up their life or their car or their day. Got it? And they're going to each take another 20 plus calls and start setting up tomorrow. And they're going to handle the status calls that are coming in from the cars that are in there today. How are we doing so far?
Doing good. You're right on.
Yeah. So it's kind of like this aha, like, how long has this been around? Pretty much forever. Like, grandma's always cut the ends of the ham off, but the reason she started was the pan was too small, right? Why they did this back in the day, I don't know, but we still do it today. That makes zero sense. So one of the things that I've said many times is that, look, the service advisors forgot more about scheduling appointments than any coordinated effort ever will truly know. And that's my way of sort of saying, it's not that you're not able to do a great job. It's not that you don't have the acumen. You don't have something more important: time, uninterrupted time. And that exchange is very, very important. Yesterday, sidebar comment, Dawn and I went to our favorite restaurant for Valentine's Day. Set the reservation up a couple weeks in advance. Food was great. Time was great. But the gatekeeper there, Scott, is always like horrible. Like, you almost feel like Soup Nazi from Seinfeld. Like, and it's just this show every time. And I just think to myself, what a shame. If the food wasn't so good, I just wouldn't come back here. You know what I mean? But her and I have been doing it for 30 years. So to me, really looking for, when Bezos got the vision for that what's that company called that he started?
I can't remember. It's on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah, I'll have to Google it. Something's on. Yeah. What he saw was music and book sales. You remember that? And he was counting the iterations of basically albums, and books being sold. And in his mind, he's thinking margin on that. Okay, well, I remember Dawn, my wife, saying to me, she's like, this is like 2000. And I was like, she's telling me about Amazon. And I was like, that'll never make it. And she's like, really? Why? I said, that's too narrow. That's too narrow. Well, little did I know that logo, if you look carefully, the arrow from the A to the Z, guess what that implied? Everything from A to Z. I just didn't understand the vision yet. Got it?
Yeah.
My gut was right, at the time, but I didn't have perspective, like I just spoke to a minute ago, right?
Right.
Hold on, Daniel-son, is what Jeff would have said. We're just getting started, right? We're doing books and we're going to kind of master this, and then we're going to start adding stuff. Now, what did they actually make? They don't make anything. Nothing. To me, that's like eBay 2.0.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's right. 100%.
Yeah. So I love these kind of combos because when you start.
Well, that's where I got, you use the word iterations, right? And that's where, so if we're sitting here saying, all right, one of the things that we identified, you identified the 3 F's, fog, fatigue, flirtations is some of the biggest challenges or obstacles that keep us from driving growth. And then you said, flirtations would be the number. If I could choose one to fix right now, it would be flirtations. And so you're sitting here saying, I'm flirting with all these stuff instead of focusing in on all these iterations, all these connections that I've got coming through the service. And if I only focus there, I drive more growth than anything else I do.
Yeah. Yeah. If we count money in terms of gross profit, service is going to win every day.
Yeah.
Service is going to win unless you're doing something so as such an outlier, like you're crushing equity mining at such a ridiculous number. You know what I'm saying? Like not something 80% of the stores in the United States are going to be able to do. So
but even the equity mining, the biggest wins come through the back end through service.
You took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say, where are you going to go find that? So it's kind of like, hey, it's asking the right questions. We want to grow. Okay. How do we want to grow? Okay. And the significance question, again, I'm going to go back to that. If you have a dealership for sale whose absorption is 140%, some ridiculous number. And for those that don't know what absorption is, if it costs $100,000 a month to run that store, and that'd be a tiny number, by the way, 140% would be that store generates $140,000 of gross profit from service and parts without selling a car. So without selling a car, you're already making money. Okay. And when you sell cars, now here's the next question. If that store's sitting at 140%, how much more aggressive can our used car manager be on those trades? Well, look,
Yeah,
I don't know what
that's
you
right.
are across town, but I'm gonna crush you.
Yeah,
I'm gonna pay an extra grand for that car, and I'm not gonna sweat it. I may take a skinnier deal in used, but we're gonna dominate market share because we have momentum because we've already won where we have to win. You get it?
correct.
Then we're gonna develop prepaid maintenance plans to where the customer doesn't even think about it. It's already included in the car. And so it's money burning a hole in their pockets. They really almost have
It's
to service with us. I mean, I
assuming you have a yeah, assuming you create a great client experience, which starts online and or by that mobile device. Are you easy to find? You're competitive, you offer, but as long as you have a superior client experience, the easiest place to grow market share is in fixed ops in the dealership world.
For those thinking you got to be perfect at this, I don't know Brian Benstock myself. I'm kind of at a distance, not really well. But one of the things I would compliment Brian on if I were talking to him is he's not afraid to make a mistake, Scott. And so
No,
sometimes, like, there's people out here listening to this.
Brian's an opportunity. I don't know
I know
Brian
he
very
is.
well. Him and I have met very well, but he is very much. This is an industry, and this is going to come back on me, but this is an industry where people talk about wanting to try new ideas, but actions speak louder than words, right? And our actions as an industry don't always align with those words. But Brian is a true Brian Kramer, by the way, is another guy who's now on
Yes.
the other side of the aisle. But um,
Yes.
they're not afraid. The opportunity. They're so driven by the opportunity
Great point with
that
Kramer.
they want it. They'll take their risk. They're educated risks.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're just
I just
jumping
want to
out
just
there.
say for those that are afraid to try, look, do your homework, right? Make educated guesses, but don't be afraid to put it out there. Don't be
Yeah.
afraid to do your betas and if your intention is right, again, if it is to be significant, right? I mean, would you agree that what Benstock has accomplished with the Honda Acura store there in New York is significant? I would.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's incredibly significant. What Brian Kramer
Well,
did,
I think what's more significant with what he's done is the longevity of it.
correct. There's the
You
significance.
know, correct. It's like David Spizak likes to say, it's easy to climb Mount Everest. It's a lot harder to live up there.
Correct. Or even
Yeah.
climb down. Yeah. Or even climb down. Some people don't think about the climb down. And then Brian Kramer, metaverse. I mean, when he was first talking about metaverse stuff, he was still at Germain. I mean, right over my head, right? It was kind of like crypto,
Yeah.
But
Well,
it's
but I've
fun to
heard
watch him think and
Brian,
apply.
John, I've heard Brian in rooms go toe to toe with people in a respectful way.
Yeah.
Um,
He's a pro.
on like used cars, right?
Yep.
Do I give numbers over the phone? Do I give an actual trade appraisal over the phone or on the internet, email, text, however you're communicating? And he's a big proponent in doing that. Whereas some of the old school way is, no, I need to get them there. I got to appraise it. I'm not going to take a chance. I'm not going to empower my people to do that type of stuff. But he's done the difference between the reason his argument wins. I think his argument wins for me is because it's backed by, he's actually studied it. And I can't remember how long his control study was, whether it was 6 months or 12 months, where he's done it both ways. And did they lose deals or did they miss and maybe cost themselves on some occasional values by hitting the number wrong? Maybe the car comes in, it's not as nice as the way the client described it, whatever. He says the gain far outweighed the loss. The gain was far much worth it by giving the client what they needed in a quick, easy number up front versus playing the games or trying some of the old school methods that we've done in the past. His is backed by an actual study where he's done it both ways.
Yeah.
All right. And so to me, that's when I sit there and say, I know I'm going to take a beating here and there. But in the end, which way do I win on? Which strategy is the one where I net the best result?
Confidence This is an old axiom, and it kind of flows into what you just said. So when you're doing something like that and you have confidence, where does that come from? It comes from predictability. Where does predictability come from? Something you've done before. So here's a guy who's testing what's going on, right? And going, hey, you know what? We actually do this with confidence because we've done it enough. For the person in the audience that's pushing back on Brian Kramer in that vein, right, in that circle, Scott, there's no confidence. Why? Because they haven't done it, right?
Correct.
So
That's right.
there's kind of the lesson, right? You can argue a point, but you really can't argue it well until you what? Until you try it. We hired a guy. We worked on an interview this week. Quick sidebar story. We had two folks interviewing for a very high level position at the ranch operations, and this is for one of our very important locations. And so the first candidate, it was just amazing to me to hear how sharp this person was. And we were talking about basically how we approach certain processes, whether it was merchandising, storage, hauling, whatever. And there's there's millions of dollars a year. There's a lot at stake doing these mobile stores and stuff, right? Rolling vans into major stores. Anyway, he asked a question, and it was different than the way we did it. And here's what I said. I said, first of all, I love the question. Second of all, we thought the same thing at one point. Third, we tried it. Fourth, you want to hear what happened? Yeah, we got crushed. Here's what happened. We did this, we did this, we did. So we've already spent the money on that idea. So now, if you want to pony up the money and try it again, I'm all for getting a front row seat. And he laughed. And I said, but we've tried that. However, keep the ideas coming, please. And he followed up with the recruiter, and he's like, man, I see myself working with these guys. I love how they think. So the idea was, we basically said no to his idea because we had tried it and we got crushed and we paid for it. But we also said it in a way where it wasn't like, hey, Attila rules. It was like, hey, but if you want to bring your own cash to the table and roll the dice, maybe we did it wrong. Maybe you want to show us how to do that. No, that makes sense. I'd never tried it. So to me, that's how you test. Are we having real conversations here or philosophical ones? How about that?
Yeah. Well, going back to Brian Benstock with what you were saying earlier, if you look at what he does in terms of his pickup and delivery or drop off with his service clients, his service customers, he charges a flat rate for that pickup and drop off. Doesn't matter where the client's coming from.
Yep.
So there are going to be some clients where he doesn't make as much or potentially, depending on the service work, loses money. But he has the confidence and the predictability because he's run the numbers. He's done the data. He's studied it. And he sits there and says, if I average, my average is this. So as long as I'm charging this for the pickup and drop off, it doesn't matter if I have the occasional loss. Quit worrying about the losses. Worry, to Michael Poro's point, quit worrying about losing and worry more about the winning, right?
Or use failure as fuel. I like that too, Mike. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
hey, you know what's interesting about that charge, about, him charging for the pickup and delivery? You realize there are a few manufacturers reimbursing dealers, and there's still more than a handful that don't want to participate in that process.
That just blows me away.
Like, okay, you're selling iron, but you are still selling parts. You're still selling parts. If I were you, I would reappropriate money. If you're a manufacturer who hasn't done that yet, I would reappropriate money towards pickup and delivery and get your retail network thinking about how do we engage this process? How do we deliver on this? You want to talk about saving money later when you have all those blank brand vehicles coming right back in your drives?
Yeah. Do you gravitate more towards the person that goes after the win versus the someone that's a little more reserved and wants to protect? It doesn't mean we can't appreciate both. But where do you, who are your friends?
51-49. Obviously, I'm going to lean towards the attack, but I want to make sure that we're all here and we got this right. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
You too?
absolutely. Listen, this is perfect for my next question. So, all right. So we've got these huge goals. We've asked the right questions and so that have helped us come up with a game plan or a strategy to achieve them in the time frame, right? How
Yep.
do you approach risk management when it comes to business growth? What techniques do you use to reduce potential risks?
When you're thinking risk, I think I'd suggest you have a system and have a system for staying out in front of risk management. So, okay, so what does that look like? So typically that starts with a strategic plan. You say, well, okay, how long should that be? I think in any small, medium-sized business, it should be at least a 10-year outlook, right? So like right now we have EV sitting here around us, right? And
Yep.
in one ear they're telling us next week all cars are going to be electric and they're going to come pick up your ICE engine. I'm exaggerating, right? And in another they're saying, well, shoot, we won't have enough grid until 2095 or whatever, right? I'm making this up. Okay,
Yep.
so again, extreme exaggerations just to not land anywhere, but to sort of show the point. Okay, so you want to stay out in front of risk management. In big companies, you're talking 50 years or more. Toyota had a 100-year business plan, and that was in 1995 when I was speaking, and working with Toyota TMS nationally. 100 years. Okay, so you say, okay, John, give me a practical way of doing this. Okay, this is a system I use. I have 7 and 5, 7 vital signs in each business that I have, Scott. And I have 5 critical standards that have to be in place. And everybody has they have a purview of this. It's on their phones. So, okay, can I tell this story? Is this okay?
Go right ahead. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. So first of all, why am I even going down this road when it comes to risk? You should be qualitative and quantitative with risk. You should be both. All right. So one of the struggles I had in like the 2013 through 2016 window was I saw leaders in the organizations that didn't know their numbers. They didn't know their numbers. Now, coming out of the car business, what did they tell us the first week in the business? It's a numbers game, right? I always tell the story. It's a numbers game. They told you that, they told me that. It's still a numbers game, but the numbers have changed, right? They evolve, right? It's not the exact same number. It's not 30% of walk-ins buy on the first visit or whatever, Jackie B. Cooper, 1980 or 70,
Right.
It's evolved. Okay. So it's really important to make sure your numbers are legit, but you need to know your numbers. Tillman Fertitta, who owns a ton of restaurants, publicly traded, right? That's one of his favorite things too with his leaders is know your numbers. Okay, so how can I do that? So I got with my CFO, Byron Youngblood, who's a star, and I'm like, buddy, I want to get this data in front of them on a regular basis, and here's why. I said, I can't really work on accountability, and I can't really expect a lot of growth if they don't know where they're at, right? And he's like, okay, just tell me what you want to do. So I started looking at these different organizations that sell business objects and would be able to take data and put it in charts and mobilize it. And I found this company. You should write this down. Okay. It's called Grow, GROW, gogrow.com or grow.com. And so I don't spend a ton of money on, well, I do. I spend thousands, but it's not a lot for what I get. So you get a certain amount of tiles, okay? And in the tile is a topic. So my 7 vital signs and my 5 critical standards are in there. And it's responsive. It's something they download on their phone. So you say, okay, John, apply this. Give me an example. Okay, so our new sales revenue for the month. That's one of our vital signs. We have an objective, and every single person involved in that sees it. Oh, by the way, they're also tied to total revenue each year. So, and there's bonuses that are tied to it. So they know exactly where they're at. And then at the beginning of each month, we recap last month with that leadership team. Here's where at, they do their part, and they're running the business. They got it. In the contact center space, there's things like ATT. What is that? Average talk time. There's things like ASA. What is that? average speed to answer. That's how long people are holding. And we have standards there that we've created. We say, look, we got to have enough people to be able to do this and Turnover. We know what turnover costs us, so we measure it monthly. And they have a standard where they're at. And they're incentivized to create a work culture where that turnover is low enough, lower than industry. So you say risk management. Risk it starts out, I think, buddy, it starts out by getting out far enough in front and knowing what can create the issue. Then you know how to build the moat, if you will, around the business. These are the performing areas. Then you got to pare it down, because what'll happen in a lot of businesses, you'll have so many of these that, basically, if you're tracking everything, you're tracking nothing, right? So it's too much. So you get it down to 7 and 5. And, Grow would be a great tool. Everybody here has it. You got to know your numbers if you're in the game. And I think there's only 2 problems in business. There's knowing problems and doing problems. And so what I wanted to do with that exercise to be able to combat risk is I wanted to get rid of the knowing, where there's no way you could ever say, John, I didn't know. Bro, can't say that. You got numbers just like everybody else. And they're updated every day. So I tip my cap to Byron Youngblood, who sees to that in our organization, he and his team. And it's fantastic. So there you go. That's my whack at that.
All right, let's finish the show with this question. How important is client feedback in driving business growth? And then what methods do you use to gather the feedback and then analyze it?
Mm-hmm. Okay. In my opinion, business growth, it needs a simple way of being measured first. You can add to it from there, but it needs a simple way where everybody looks at it and agrees. So you say, Joe, what do you use? I use 2 words: primary result. Primary result. It's a simple term that we use here to do it. So in various businesses, it changes, but the single best measurable indicator of the overall health of the organization becomes our primary result. And the way we measure that is we ask questions. It's as simple as to our client, is this working for you, Scott? At this point, would you say it's working for you? How are you guys utilizing it? How's it benefiting you? And then here's another one, Scott, what do you need us working on next? What does that imply? It implies continuity of the relationship. It implies that what we have is good, but we want to keep working and improving. So when they are succeeding, here's the message, buddy, you're in business. And when they're not, as they say, you're going out of business. It's that simple.
Yeah. I was just hired to come in, someone who's been following business, bourbon, and cigars, to go in. They're bringing in about 20 to 30 of their top clients. This is a really big business. And, they were struggling with these type of things of having people up there talk about best practices and all the same stuff. So I went over the format, and so they're bringing me in to actually run through 2 different masterminds. And I said, let me tell you what's great about this. I said, for one, your clients are going to solve a lot of big issues and problems and create a lot of new opportunities for themselves. But while you guys are participating in this, you are going to hear firsthand what their biggest challenges are, why they're important to them, why they are challenges. And this is an IT and software development company. I said, you're going to uncover new products and services. I mean, they're basically going to tell you a wish list of everything that you need to create. That's what's going to come out of this. So we're going to cover 2 different things. This is an industry that's a little bit behind auto. Not that auto's super advanced in terms of like the digital retailing world, but there are other industries that are even behind it. This is one of them. And then, getting new business, new conquest business. Those are going to be the 2 topics we talk about. It's not a full-on business, bourbon, and cigars with all the excursions and activities and the fun stuff. But it was a last minute plan. So they're bringing me in to do that. And I'm excited about that. but going to your point, right? You're talking about ask. And that's basically what we're not directly asking them the question, but the way the mastermind works, it'll uncover that just by asking them those simple questions.
Is it
Another way, I
working
think,
for you? Is it benefiting you? What should we be
correct,
working on next?
correct.
I can't tell you, John Fraser, who just left one of the AMSI stores, he went to Houston. I don't know if you saw that,
I
but
did.
he hired us already at that store with Justin Pomeroy.
Yep.
You want to talk about an incredible partner, John Fraser, but he embodies this. But you ask him if Bob Gower, as he's partnering with him, asks those questions, and he's going to tell you
Yeah.
yes. If you ask him, hey, are they always perfect? He's going to tell you no. He's going to say,
Yeah.
look, they screw up, but they take care of it. They'll
right.
address it, or they'll, and then do they excel? Yeah, there's areas we could never execute in that they execute for us. So to me, when you're in the ivory tower and you're creating those ideas and you're not out there dialoguing,
Well, think about it, John. If you're in the IT world or software development world, right? And you've got your top clients in there, and the topic is digital retailing. What's keeping you from being better at digital retailing? A lot of that comes down to that tool, that software, right?
Yeah.
It of course, process will come into that as well, but sometimes the tool, you're limited on your process because you're limited by what the capabilities are. I mean, this company's going to hear firsthand, we needed to do this, we needed to do that. I wish we could do that. I mean, it's basically going to be a wish list, because I'll approach it as if anything's possible. I don't want to hear that. Don't talk about solutions as to what your current situation is. Part of this thing here is to develop the solution that's going to get you exactly what you want. So, but another good way on client feedback, really pay attention. Don't pay attention to your reviews just for the sake of having a good social image and social brand. So in other words, a lot of companies, I think, pay attention to their reviews, good or bad, and know that they got to respond to them. And it's the typical canned stuff, right? Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We've reached out to you privately, or you could call us here, right? Because they don't want to escalate and have the debate online, and it shows other people that they're responsive, but then they never do anything with it. So your clients, in your reviews, you should welcome the negatives as long as you're handling them right, as much as the positives, because they're going to tell you what you're doing well, certain reviews, and what you need to build on. And then other things that they're telling you, you guys stink here, fix this. And it just gives you a blueprint of what you can do. I mean, those negative reviews tend to be about the same things.
Yeah. What's that old axiom with customer service? It's like, 80% of the people who weren't happy, not only will they not come back, but they'll tell their friends and family. That's been around for like a quarter of a century, right?
That's right.
Even though it's evolved, it hasn't really changed. And there was a guy I met years ago, and I loved how he used to say this. He'd basically say, look, if we're doing well, that's good. I want to know where we stink, where we are screwing up. That's what I want to know. And I just thought, wow, like how transparent is that? I remember a pastor in Houston, church we went to for over a decade. He would say towards the end of service, if you're looking for a perfect church, keep looking. That's what he would say. But if you're looking for a church home, and I just thought, man, isn't that real? I mean, I love that. So I'll say that with our team too. Hey, if you're looking for a perfect company, keep looking. Call me when you find us so we can write the book. But in the meantime, let me tell you what we are passionate about here. Let me tell you what we are chasing here. That's real. It's approachable. And I think there's some achievement that kind of rings true with that sort of outlook, if you will.
Yeah. Well, that's a wrap on today's episode of Move, Crush, Count. First off, I want to extend a huge thank you to you. That's John Traver, everybody. As you could tell, if you watched and or are listening to this episode, I mean, you are a true student of business, probably of life, but definitely in self-improvement, but definitely of business. I mean, if you go to his office, if you have the opportunity, he's got a library, not a normal, like couple shelves He's actually got a dedicated room right off of his office there that is a library to personal development, business development, philosophy, strategies. That's why when he's quoting all these people like John Maxwell and everybody else, he knows what he lives it. It's not show with him. I could sit here. I mean, this 36 minutes longer than we had planned, but we could. Let me tell you, I didn't ask half the questions.
Oh my God.
We could have kept going, but I will be respectful of everyone's time. I could talk to you all day about business. Because it's just I gained so much from it. So, I mean, we talked about everything from identifying challenges, to developing, executing different growth plans. We talked about how you ask the right questions to set all that up. I mean, the whole thing. I mean, just a really good show. I appreciate you helping the audience.
It was my pleasure. I hope there's value there for those that were with us or those that watch it, afterwards. And you are a true friend, and it's fun. I mean, this sort of evolves as you and I do these ping pongs, and my respect for you and your organization, your people it's 10 out of 10, buddy. Keep going.
I appreciate it.
Yep.
I want the audience to do us a big favor. I want you to get to know John, and if it's in auto, I want you to go to traverconnect.com. You owe it to yourself to check this out. And he brought up Bob Gower. I don't know if Bob would handle these calls, but I know Bob's always the one I go to. Listen, you're like me. I've got Jamil. When people need to get something done, I send them to Jamil. So you always send me to Bob. So
I mean, I'll do it, but I can't promise you what it's going to look like when it's done. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
he's got all the levers, he's got everything, so I just work here, buddy. I just work here.
That's what I do.
Yeah.
All right. So remember, if you've enjoyed this episode, please also visit movecrushcount.com so you can catch up on all the past episodes. Subscribe so you never miss another one. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook so you can stay connected with the community. And John's a member of our Facebook group as well. So he'll be in there answering any questions you might have. Don't forget to rate us and review us. We don't pay to promote the show. It's all organic growth. So all the support means the world to us. I want to thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Move Crush Count. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, John.